Dedication, Foreword, and Glossary of Over the Top. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording is by Mark Smith of Simpsonville, South Carolina. Over the Top by an American Soldier Who Went by Arthur Guy Empey, machine gunner, serving in France together with Tommy's Dictionary of the Trenches. This book will be split into two sections. In the first two files, Tommy's Dictionary of the Trenches, which is really a glossary of terms, will be presented. If you are already familiar with military lingo, and specifically that of the British soldier, then you could probably skip this and go straight to the third file. On the other hand, you may want to stick with the glossary, because it does pick up terms that are specific to the British Army, and also Empey treats his subject with humor as he sees these things through the eyes of a British Tommy, or soldier. Dedication to my mother and my sister. I have had many good comrades as I have journeyed around the world, before the mast and in the trenches, but loyal and true as they were, none have ever done, or could ever do, as much as you have done for me. So as a little token of my gratitude for your love and sacrifice, I dedicate this book to you. Foreword. During 16 years of roughing it, knocking around the world, I have nibbed against the high and low and have had ample opportunity of studying, at close range, many different people, their ideas, political and otherwise, their hopes and principles. Through this elbow-rubbing, and not from reading, I have become convinced of the nobility, truth, and justice of the Allies' cause, and know their fight to be our fight, because it espouses the principles of the United States of America, democracy, justice, and liberty. To the average American who has not lived and fought with him, the Englishman appears to be distant, reserved, a slow thinker, and lacking in humor. But from my association with the man who inhabits the British Isles, I find that this opinion is unjust. To me, Tommy Atkins has proved himself to be the best of mates, a pal, and bubbling over with a fine sense of humor, a man with a just cause who is willing to sacrifice everything but honor in the advancement of the same. It is my fondest hope that Uncle Sam and John Bull, arms locked, as mates, good and true, each knowing and appreciating the worth of the other, will wend their way through the years to come, happy and contented in each other's company. So if this poor attempt of mine will, in any way, help to bring Tommy Atkins closer to the doorstep of Uncle Sam, my ambition will have been realized. Perhaps to some of my readers it will appear that I have written of a great and just cause in a somewhat flippant manner, but I assure them such was not my intention. I have tried to tell my experiences in the language of Tommy sitting on the fire step of a front line trench on the Western Front, just as he would tell his mate next him what was happening at a different part of the line. Signed, A.G.E., New York City, May, 1917. Tommy's Dictionary of the Trenches, Part 1. In this so-called dictionary I've tried to list most of the pet terms and slangy definitions which Tommy Atkins uses 1,000 times a day as he is serving in France. I've gathered them as I lived with him in the trenches and rest billets, and later in the hospitals in England where I met men from all parts of the line. The definitions are not official, of course. Tommy is not a sentimental sort of animal, so some of his definitions are not exactly complimentary, but he is not cynical and does not mean to offend anyone higher up. It is just a sort of ragging or kidding, as the American would say, that helps him pass the time away. Slang terms, sayings, phrases, etc. About turn. A military command similar to about face, or to the rear march, Tommy's nickname for Heberturn, a point on the British line. Adjutant. The name given to an officer who helps the colonel do something. He rides a horse, and you see him at guard mounting and battalion parade. ADMS. The Assistant Director of Medical Service. Have never seen him, but he is supposed to help the DMS and pass on cases where Tommy is posted as unfit for trench service. Aerial Torpedo. A kind of trench mortar shell guaranteed by the makers to break up Fritz's supper of sausages and beer, even though said supper is in a dugout 30 feet down. Sometimes it lives up to its reputation. Alarm. A signal given in the trenches that the enemy is about to attack, frequently false. It is mainly used to break up Tommy's dreams of home. All-around traverse. A machine gun so placed that its fire can be turned in any direction. Allemand. A French term meaning German. Tommy uses it because he thinks it is a swear word. Allotment. A certain sum Tommy allows to his family. Allumettes. French term for what they sell to Tommy as matches, the sulphurous fumes from which have been known to gas a whole platoon. Ammo. Rifle ammunition, used to add weight to Tommy's belt. He carries 120 rounds at all times, except when he buries it under the straw in his billet before going on a route march. In the trenches he expends it in the direction of Berlin. Ammo depot. A place where ammunition is stored. It is especially useful in making enemy airmen waste bombs trying to hit it. Ammonal. A high explosive used in the Mills bomb. The Germans are more able than Tommy to discourse on its effects. Any complaints? A useless question asked by an inspecting officer when he makes the rounds of billets or Tommy's meals. A complaining Tommy generally lands on the crime sheet. It is only recruits who complain, the old men just sigh with disgust. AOC. The Army Ordnance Corps. A department which deals out supplies to the troops. Its chief asset is the returning of requisitions because a comma is misplaced. APM. Assistant Provost Marshal. An officer at the head of the military police. His headquarters are generally out of reach of the enemy's guns. His chief duties are to ride around in a motor car and wear a red band around his cap. Après la guerre. Means after the war. Tommy's definition of heaven. ASC. Army Service Corps, or Army Safety Corps as Tommy calls it, the members of which bring up supplies to the rear of the line. Back of the line. Any place behind the firing line out of range of enemy guns. Bailer. A scoop affair for bailing out water from the trenches and dugouts. As the trenches generally drain the surrounding landscape, the sun has to be appealed to before the job is completed. Bantams. Men under the standard army height of 5 feet 3 inches. They are in a separate organization called the Bantam Battalion, and although undersized have the opinion that they can lick the whole German army. Barbed wire. A lot of prickly wire entwined around stakes driven in front of the trenches. This obstruction is supposed to prevent the Germans from taking lodgings in your dugouts. It also affords the enemy artillery rare sport trying to blow it up. Barndook. Tommy's nickname for his rifle. He uses it because it is harder to say and spell than rifle. Barrage. Concentrated shell fire on a sector of the German line. In the early days of the war, when ammunition was defective, it often landed on Tommy himself. Barricade. An obstruction of sandbags to impede the enemy's traffic into your trench. You build it up and he promptly knocks it down, so what's the use? Bashed in. Smashed by a shell, generally applied to a trench or dugout. Batman. A man who volunteers to clean a non-commissioned officer's buttons, but who never volunteers for a trench raid. He ranks next to a worm. Bayonet. A sort of knife-like contrivance which fits on the end of your rifle. The government issues it to stab Germans with. Tommy uses it to toast bread. Big boys. Large guns, generally 8-inch or above. Big push. The Battle of the Somme. He often calls it the 1st of July, the date on which it started. Big stuff. Large shells, 8-inch or over. Big Willie. Tommy's term for his personal friend, the Kaiser. Billet. Sometimes a regular house, but generally a stable where Tommy sleeps while behind the lines. It is generally located near a large manure pile. Most billets have numerous entrances, one for Tommy and the rest for rain, rats, wind, and shells. Billet guard. 3 men and a corporal who are posted to guard the billets of soldiers. They do this until the orderly officer has made his rounds at night. Then they go to sleep. Biscuit. A concoction of flour and water, baked until very hard. Its original use was for building purposes, but Tommy is supposed to eat it. Tommy is no coward, but he balks at this. Biscuits make excellent fuel and give no smoke. Bivouac. A term given by Tommy to a sort of tent made out of waterproof sheets. Blastine. A high explosive which promotes Kultur in the German lines. Blighty. An East Indian term meaning over the seas. Tommy has adopted it as a synonym for home. He tries numerous ways of reaching Blighty, but the powers that be are wise to all of his attempts, so he generally fails. Blighty one. A wound serious enough to send Tommy to England. BMGC. Brigade Machine Gun Company. Composed of Vickers machine gunners. They always put their packs on a limber or small wagon while route marching, which fact greatly arouses the jealousy of Tommy. Body snatcher. Tommy's term for a sniper. Bomb. An infernal device filled with high explosive which you throw at the Germans. Its chief delight is to explode before it leaves your hand. Bomb store. A place where bombs are kept, built so the enemy cannot locate them with his fire. For that matter, Tommy can't either when he needs them. Bombing post. A sort of trench or sap running from your front line to within a few yards of the enemy's trench. It is occupied by bomb throwers who would like to sign an agreement with the Germans for neither side to throw bombs. Brag. A card game similar to poker at which every player quits a loser and no one wins, that is, according to the statements of the several players. Brazier. A sheet iron pot punched full of holes in which a fire is built. It is used to keep Tommy warm in his dugout until he becomes unconscious from its smoke and fumes. He calls it a fire bucket. Brigade guard. Several men who are detailed to guard brigade headquarters. They don't go to sleep. BSM. The Battalion Sergeant Major. The highest ranking non-commissioned officer in the battalion. A constant dread to Tommy when he has forgotten to polish his buttons or dub in his boots. Bully beef. A kind of corned beef with tin round it. The unopened cans make excellent walls for dugouts. Berm. A narrow ledge cut along the walls of a trench to prevent earth from caving in. Berm to Tommy is a cuss word because he has to go over the top at night to construct it. Busted. Term applied when a non-commissioned officer is reduced by court-martial. Button stick. A contrivance made of brass 10 inches long which slides over the buttons and protects the tunic in cleaning. Called to the colors. A man on reserve who has been ordered to report for service. Camel Corps. Tommy's nickname for the infantry because they look like overloaded camels, and probably because they also go 8 days and longer without a drink, that is, of the real stuff. Candle. A piece of wick surrounded by wax or tallow used for lighting purposes. One candle among 6 men is the general issue. Canister. A German trench mortar shell filled with scraps of iron and nails. Tommy really has a great contempt for this little token of German affection, and he uses the nails to hang his equipment on in the dugouts. Canteen. A mess tin issued to Tommy, who after dinner generally forgets to wash it, and pinches his mates for tea in the evening. Carry on. Resume. Keep on with what you are doing. Go ahead. Carrying in. Machine gunner's term for taking guns, ammunition, etc. into the front line trench. Caterpillar. Is not a bug, but the name given to a powerful engine used to haul the big guns over rough roads. CCS. Casualty Clearing Station. A place where the doctors draw lots to see if Tommy is badly wounded enough to be sent to Blighty. Chalk pit. A white spot on a painted landscape used at the machine gunners' school to train would-be gunners in picking out distinctive objects in landscapes and guessing ranges. Challenge. A question, who goes there? Thrown at an unknown moving object by a sentry in the darkness, who hopes that said moving object will answer, friend. Char. A black poisonous brew which Tommy calls tea. Chevaux de frise. Barbed wire defenses against cavalry. Chucking his weight about. Self-important. Generally applied to a newly promoted non-commissioned officer or a recruit airing his knowledge. Chum. An endearing word used by Tommy to his mate when he wants to borrow something or have a favor done. Clicked it. Got killed. Up against it. Wounded. Clock. Trench speak for the face. Coal box. The name for a high explosive German shell fired from a 5.9 howitzer which emits a heavy black smoke and makes Tommy's hair stand on end. Coal fatigue. A detail on which Tommy has to ride in a limber and fill 2 sacks with coal. It takes him exactly 4 hours to do this. He always misses morning parade but manages to get back in time for dinner. Coal. Tommy's nickname for a penny. It buys 1 glass of French beer. Coming it. Trying to put something over. Coming the ad. Boasting, lying about something. Communication trench. A zigzag ditch leading from the rear to the front line trench, through which reinforcements, reliefs, ammunition, and rations are brought up. Its real use is to teach Tommy how to swear and how to wade through mud up to his knees. Communique. An official report which is published daily by the different warring governments for the purpose of kidding the public. They don't kid Tommy. Company stores. The quartermaster sergeant's headquarters where stores are kept. A general hangout for batmen, officers' servants, and NCOs. Compray. Tommy's French for "Do you understand?" Universally used in the trenches. Conscript. A man who tried to wait until the war was over before volunteering for the army, but was balked by the government. Consolidate captured line. Digging in or preparing a captured position for defense against a counterattack. Convalescence. 6 weeks' rest allotted to a wounded Tommy. During this time the government is planning where they will send Tommy to be wounded a second time. C. of E. The Church of England. This is stamped on Tommy's identification disc. He has to attend church parade whether or not he wants to go to heaven. Cook. A soldier detailed to spoil Tommy's rations. He is generally picked because he was a blacksmith in civil life. Cooties. Unwelcome inhabitants of Tommy's shirt. Counterattack. A disagreeable habit of the enemy which makes Tommy realize that after capturing a position the hardest work is to hold it. Covering party. A number of men detailed to lie down in front of a working party while out in front, to prevent surprise and capture by German patrols. Tommy loves this job, I don't think. Crater. A large circular hole in the ground made by the explosion of a mine. According to official communiques, Tommy always occupies a crater with great credit to himself, but sometimes the Germans get there first. Cricket ball. The name given to a bomb the shape and size of a cricket ball. Tommy does not use it to play cricket with. Crime sheet. A useless piece of paper on which is kept a record of Tommy's misdemeanors. Crump. A name given by Tommy to a high explosive German shell which when it bursts makes a crump sort of noise. CSM. The Company Sergeant Major, the head non-commissioned officer of a company, whose chief duty is to wear a crown on his arm, a couple of Boer War ribbons on his chest, and to put Tommy's name and number on the crime sheet. Curtain fire. A term applied by the artillery to a wall of shell fire on the enemy communication trenches, to prevent the bringing up of men and supplies, and also to keep our own front lines from wavering. But somehow or other, men and supplies manage to leak through it. Cushy. Easy, comfortable, pretty soft. DAC. The Divisional Ammunition Column. A collection of men, horses, and limbers, which supplies ammunition for the line and keeps Tommy awake while in billets with their infernal noise. They are like owls, always working at night. DCM. The Distinguished Conduct Medal. A piece of bronze which a soldier gets for being foolish. DCP. The Divisional Concert Party. An aggregation of would-be actors who inflict their talents on Tommy at half a franc per head. Defaulter. Not an absconding cashier, but a Tommy who has been sentenced to extra pack drill for breathing while on parade or doing some other little thing like that. Deco. To look, a look at something. Detonator. A contrivance in a bomb containing fulminate of mercury, which, ignited by a fuse, explodes the charge. De-roughs. Derzosuffs. Tommy's French for 2 eggs. Dial. Another term of Tommy's for his map, or face. Digging in. Digging trenches and dugouts in a captured position. Digging party. A detail of men told off to dig trenches, graves, or dugouts. Tommy is not particular as to which he has to dig. It's the actual digging he objects to. Dinner up. Dinner is ready. Divisional band. Another devilish aggregation which wastes most of its time in practicing and polishing its instruments. Dixie. An iron pot with 2 handles on it in which Tommy's meals are cooked. Its real efficiency lies in the fact that when carrying it, your puttees absorb all the black grease on its sides. Doing them in. Killing them. Cutting up a body of German troops. Donkey. An army mule, an animal for which Tommy has the greatest respect. He never pets or in any way becomes familiar with said mule. Draft. A contingent of new men sent as reinforcements for the trenches. Tommy takes special delight in scaring these men with tales of his own experiences which he never had. Draftsman. A member of a draft who listens to and believes Tommy's weird tales of trench warfare. Dressing station. A medical post where Tommy gets his wounds attended to, if he is lucky enough to get wounded. He is lucky because a wound means Blighty. Drill order. Rifle, belt, bayonet, and respirator. Dry canteen. An army store where Tommy may buy cigarettes, chocolate, and tinned fruit, that is, if he has any money. DSO. Distinguished Service Order. Another piece of metal issued to officers for being brave. Tommy says it is mostly won in dugouts and calls it a dugout service order. Dubbin. A grease for boots. Dud. A German shell or bomb which has not exploded on account of a defective fuse. Tommy is a great souvenir collector, so he gathers these duds. Sometimes, when he tries to unscrew the nose cap, it sticks. Then, in his hurry to confiscate it before an officer appears, he doesn't hammer it just right, and the printer of the casualty list has to use a little more type. Dugout. A deep hole in the trenches dug by the Royal Engineer Corps, supposed to be shell-proof. It is, until a shell hits it. Rat and Tommy find it an excellent habitation in which to contract rheumatism. Dump. An uncovered spot where trench tools and supplies are placed. It is uncovered so that these will become rusty and worthless from the elements. This so that the contractors at home won't starve. Du pain. Tommy's French for bread. Efficiency pay. Extra pay allowed by the government for long service. Tommy is very efficient if he manages to get it from the government. 18-pounder. One of our guns which fires an 18-pound shell, used for destroying German barbed wire previous to an attack. If it does its duty, you bet Tommy is grateful to the 18-pounders. Elephant dugout. A large, safe, and roomy dugout, braced by heavy steel ribs or girders. Emplacement. A position made of earth or sandbags from which a machine gun is fired. It is supposed to be invisible to the enemy. They generally blow it up in the course of a couple of days, just by luck, of course. Entrenching tool. A spade-like tool for digging hasty entrenchments. It takes about a week to dig a decent hole with it, so Hasty must have another meeting. Equipment on. Put on equipment for drill or parade. Escort. A guard of soldiers who conduct prisoners to different points. Tommy is just as liable to be a prisoner as an escort. Estaminet. A French public house or saloon where muddy water is sold for beer. Fag. Cigarette. Something Tommy is always touching you for. Fag issue. Army issue of cigarettes, generally on Sunday. Fatigue. Various kinds of work done by Tommy while he is resting. Fed up. Disgusted. Got enough of it. As the rich Mr. Hoggenheimer used to say, sufficiency. Field dressing. Bandages issued to soldiers for first aid when wounded. They use them for handkerchiefs and to clean their rifles. Field postcard. A card on which Tommy is allowed to tell his family and friends that he is alive. If he is dead, the War Office sends a card, sometimes. Field punishment number 1. Official name for spread-eagling a man on a limber wheel 2 hours a day for 21 days. His rations consist of bully beef, water, and biscuits. Tommy calls this punishment crucifixion, especially if he has undergone it. 15-pounder. Still another of ours. Shell weighs 15 pounds. Used for killing rats on the German parapets. Finding the range. Ascertaining by instrument or by trial shots the distance from an enemy objective. Fireworks. A night bombardment. Fire sector. A certain space of ground which a machine gun is supposed to sweep with its fire. If the gun refuses to work, all of the enemy who crossed this space are technically dead, according to the general's plans. Firing squad. 12 men picked to shoot a soldier who has been sentenced to death by court-martial. Tommy has no comment to make on this. Firing step. A ledge in the front trench which enables Tommy to fire over the top. In rainy weather you have to be an acrobat to even stand on it on account of the slippery mud. Fire trench. The front line trench. Another name is for hell. 5 rounds rapid. Generally, just before daylight in the trenches, the order 5 rounds rapid is given. Each man puts his rifle and head over the parapet and fires 5 shots as rapidly as possible in the direction of the German trenches and then ducks. A sort of "Good morning, have you used Fears soap?" 5.9. A German shell 5.9 inches in diameter. It is their standard shell. Tommy has no special love for this brand, but they are like olives, all right when you get used to them. Flags. Tommy's nickname for a signaller. Flare. A rocket fired from a pistol which, at night, lights up the ground in front of your trench. Flare pistol. A large pistol, which looks like a sawed-off shotgun, from which flares are fired. When you need this pistol badly, it has generally been left in your dugout. Flying column. A flying column of troops that waits from one point of the line to another. In case of need, they generally arrive at the wrong point. Fokker. A type of German aeroplane which the Boche claims to be the fastest in the world. Tommy believes this because our airmen seldom catch them. For it. On the crime sheet, up against a reprimand, on trial, in trouble. 4x2. A piece of flannel 4 inches by 2 issued by the QM sergeant with which to pull through. 4.5. Another of ours. The German don't like this one. 4.7. One of our shells 4.7 inches in diameter. Tommy likes this kind. Fritz. Tommy's name for a German. He loves a German like poison. Front line. The nearest trench to the enemy. No place for a conscientious objector. Frostbite. A quick road to Blighty, which Tommy used very often until frostbite became a court-martial offense. Now he keeps his feet warm. Full pack. A soldier carrying all of his equipment. Full corporal. An NCO who sports 2 stripes on his arm and has more to say than the colonel. Fumigator. An infernal device at a hospital which cooks Tommy's uniform and returns it to him 2 sizes too small. Funk hole. Tommy's term for a dugout. A favorite spot for those of a nervous disposition. Fuse. A part of a shell or bomb which burns in a set time and ignites the detonator. Gas. Poisonous fumes which the Germans send over to our trenches. When the wind is favorable, this gas is discharged into the air from huge cylinders. The wind carries it over towards our lines. It appears like a huge yellowish-green cloud rolling along the ground. The alarm is sounded and Tommy promptly puts on his gas helmet and laughs at the Boche. Gas gong. An empty shell case hung up in the trenches and in billets. A sentry is posted near it so that in case German poison gas comes over, he can give the alarm by striking this gong with an iron bar. If the sentry happens to be asleep, we get gassed. Gassed. A soldier who has been overcome from the fumes of German poison gas or the hot air of a comrade. Gassing. A term Tommy applies to shooting the bull. Getting a sub. Touching an officer for money, to be taken out of soldiers' pay on the next payday. Getting the sparks. Bullets from a machine gun cutting enemy barbed wire at night. When a bullet strikes wire, it generally throws off a bluish spark. Machine gunners use this method at night to set their guns so that its fire will command the enemy's trench. Ginger. Nickname of a red-bearded soldier. Courage, or pep. Jippo. Bacon grease, soup. GMP. The Garrison Military Police. Soldiers detailed to patrol the roads and regulate traffic behind the lines. Tommy's pet aversion. GOC. General Officer Commanding. Tommy never sees him in the act of commanding, but has the opportunity of reading many an order signed GOC. Goggles. An apparatus made of canvas and mica which is worn over the eyes for protection from the gases of German tear shells. The only time Tommy cries is when he forgets his goggles or misses the issue. Going in. Taking over trenches. Going out. Relieved from the trenches. Gone west. Killed or died. Gooseberries. A wooden frame in the shape of a cask wrapped round with barbed wire. These gooseberries are thrown into the barbed wire entanglements to help make them impassable. Got the crown. Promoted to sergeant major. Green envelope. An envelope of a green color issued to Tommy once a week. The contents will not be censored regimentally, but are liable to censor at the base. On the outside of envelope appears the following certificate, which Tommy must sign. I certify on my honor that the contents of this envelope refer to nothing but private and family matters. After signing this certificate, Tommy immediately writes about everything but family and private matters. Groom. A soldier who looks after an officer's horse and who robs said horse of its hay. He makes his own bed comfortable with his hay. Grousing. A scientific grumbling in which Tommy cusses everything in general and offends no one. GSW. Gunshot wound. When Tommy is wounded he does not care whether it is a GSW or a kick from a mule, just so he gets back to Blighty. GS wagon. A four-wheeled wagon driven by an ASC driver. It carries supplies such as food, ammunition, trench tools, and timber for dugouts. When Tommy gets sore feet he is allowed to ride on this wagon and fills the ears of the driver with tales of his wonderful exploits. Occasionally one of these drivers believes him. Gum boots. Rubber boots issued to Tommy for wet trenches. They are used to keep his feet dry. They do when he is lucky enough to get a pair. Gumming the game. Spoiling anything, interfering. Hairbrush. Name of a bomb used in the earlier stages of the war. It is shaped like a hairbrush and is thrown by the handle. Tommy used to throw them over to the Germans for their morning toilette. Hand grenade. A general term for a bomb which is thrown by hand. Tommy looks upon all bombs with grave suspicion. From long experience he has learned not to trust them, even if the detonator has been removed. Hardtails. Mules. Haversack. A canvas bag forming part of Tommy's equipment, carried on the left side. Its original use was intended for the carrying of emergency rations and small kit. It is generally filled with a miscellaneous assortment of tobacco, pipes, bread crumbs, letters, and a lot of useless souvenirs. Having a doss. Having a sleep. Hold all. A small canvas roll in which you are supposed to carry your razor, comb, knife, fork, spoon, mirror, soap, toothbrush, etc. Tommy takes great care of the above because it means extra pack drill to come on parade unshaven. Holy Joe. Tommy's familiar but not necessarily irreverent name for the chaplain. He really has a great admiration for this officer, who although not a fighting man, so often risks his life to save a wounded Tommy. Housewife. A neat little package of needles, thread, extra shoelaces and buttons. When a button comes off Tommy's trousers, instead of going to his housewife, he looks around for a nail. Hun. Another term for a German, mostly used by war correspondents. Hun pinching. Raiding German trenches for prisoners. Identification disc. A little fiber disc which is worn around the neck by means of a string. On one side is stamped your name, rank, regimental number, and regiment, while on the other side is stamped your religion. If at any time Tommy is doubtful of his identity, he looks at his disc to reassure himself. I'm sorry. Tommy's apology. If he pokes your eye out with his bayonet, he says, "I'm sorry," and the matter is ended so far as he is concerned. In front. over the top, in front of the front line trench, in no man's land. In reserve. Troops occupying positions, billets, or dugouts, immediately in rear of the front line, who in case of an attack will support the firing line. Intelligence Department. Secret Service men who are supposed to catch spies, or be spies as the occasion demands. Interpreter. A fat job with a return ticket, held by a soldier who thinks he can speak a couple of languages. He questions prisoners as to the color of their grandmother's eyes and why they joined the army. Just imagine asking a German why he joined the army. Invalided. Sent to England on account of sickness. Iron rations. A tin of bully beef, 2 biscuits, and a tin containing tea, sugar, and oxo cubes. These are not supposed to be eaten until you die of starvation. Isolated post. An advanced part of a trench or position where 1 or 2 sentries are posted to guard against a surprise attack. While in this post, Tommy is constantly wondering what the Germans will do with his body. It's good we have a navy. One of Tommy's expressions when he is disgusted with the army and its work. Jack Johnson. A 17-inch German shell, probably called Jack Johnson because the Germans thought that with it they could lick the world. Jackknife. A knife, issued to Tommy, which weighs a stone and won't cut. Its only virtue is the fact that it has a tin opener attachment which won't open tins. Jam. A horrible mess of fruit and sugar which Tommy spreads on his bread. It all tastes the same no matter whether labeled strawberry or green gage. Jam tin. A crude sort of hand grenade which, in the early stages of the war, Tommy used to manufacture out of jam tins, ammonal, and mud. The manufacturer generally would receive a little wooden cross in recognition of the fact that he died for king and country. Jock. Universal name for a Scotchman. Kick the bucket. Died. Kilo. 5/8 of a mile. 10 kilos generally means a trek of 15 miles. King's shilling. Tommy's rate of pay per day, perhaps. Taking the king's shilling means enlisting. Kip. Tommy's term for sleep. He also calls his bed his kip. It is on guard that Tommy most desires to kip. Kit bag. A part of Tommy's equipment in which he is supposed to pack up his troubles and smile according to the words of a popular song. The composer was never in a trench. Kitchener's Army. The volunteer army raised by Lord Kitchener, the members of which signed for duration of war. They are commonly called the New Army or Kitchener's Mob. At first the regulars and territorials looked down on them, but now accept them as welcome mates. Labor Battalion. An organization which is too proud to fight. They would sooner use a pick and shovel. Lance Corporal. An NCO 1 grade above a private who wears a shoestring stripe on his arm and thinks the war should be run according to his ideas. Lead. The leading pair of horses or mules on a limber. Their only fault is that they won't lead if they happen to be mules. Leave train. The train which takes Tommy to one of the seaports on the Channel en route to Blighty when granted leave. The worst part of going on leave is coming back. Lee Enfield. Name of the rifle used by the British Army. Its caliber is .303 and the magazine holds 10 rounds. When dirty, it has a tasty habit of getting Tommy's name on the crime sheet. Legging it. Means running away. Lewis gun. A rifle-like machine gun, air-cooled, which only carries 47 rounds in its pie plate magazine. Under fire when this magazine is emptied you shout for ammo, but perhaps number 2, the ammo carrier, is lying in the rear with a bullet through his napper. Then it's "Napoo Fini," Tommy's French for Mr. Lewis. Light duty. What the doctor marks on the sick report opposite a Tommy's name when he has doubts as to whether said Tommy is putting one over on him. Usually Tommy is. Light railway. Two thin iron tracks on which small flat cars full of ammunition and supplies are pushed. These railways afford Tommy great sport in the loading, pushing, and unloading of cars. Limber. A matchbox on two wheels which gives the army mule a job. It also carries officers' packs. Liquid fire. Another striking example of German Kultur. According to the Germans it is supposed to annihilate whole brigades, but Tommy refuses to be annihilated. Listening post. 2 or 3 men detailed to go out in front at night to lie on the ground and listen for any undue activity in the German lines. They also listen for the digging of mines. It is nervous work, and when Tommy returns he generally writes for a box of phosphorine tablets, a widely advertised nerve tonic. Little Willie. Tommy's nickname for the German Crown Prince. They are not on speaking terms. Lloyd George's pets. Munition workers in England. Lonely soldier. A soldier who advertises himself as lonely through the medium of some English newspaper. If he is clever and diplomatic by this method he generally receives 2 or 3 parcels a week, but he must be careful not to write to 2 girls living on the same block, or his parcel post mail will diminish. Lonely stab. A girl who writes and sends parcels to Tommy. She got his name from the Lonely Soldier column of some newspaper. Loophole. A disguised aperture in a trench through which to snipe at Germans. Lyddite. A high explosive used in shells. Has a habit of scattering bits of anatomy over the landscape. This is the end of the first part of the glossary. See the next file for part 2.